Welcome to the Retrospect podcast, a show where people come together from different walks of life and discuss a topic from their generation's perspective. My name is Ian, and as always, I'm joined by Stoney.
Hello.
And Jason.
Hello, everyone.
Why don't you introduce our awesome guest
Yes,
today?
I appreciate that. We actually do have a very special guest today to kind of talk about with our current kind of theme of mental health. We were trying to bring in some people that could really provide some very unique perspectives on a variety of topics, because mental health is such a broad topic. But today we're going to talk about PTSD specifically, because it's out there a lot. So I have Dr. Posey. That's our guest today. He's a behavioral psychologist. And he has worked in the past with people that have had PTSD. So he would definitely have a very unique perspective on this issue, and we're looking forward to hearing what he has to say about it. Dr. Posey?
Well, thank you, Jason, and good afternoon, everyone. We're going to be covering some of the areas of PTSD, a little bit about where I picked up my craft. I was 48 before I went back to graduate school, so I had a number of life experiences. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, a couple of tours in Vietnam, a little bit with Iraqi freedom, and some time with the troops in Afghanistan. Not a consistent time. Was in South Helmand Province, along with 3 other people of my trade, and we would, as the Marines came back from combat adventures, we would reach out and find out if anybody wanted to talk about it. We were trying to get an edge off and let them download. We've become a lot more sophisticated when dealing with PTSD. If we can go back and give you a little bit of a history of how we evolved to this. In World War I, people who had problems coming back, we called them shell shock.
Shell shock, right.
Right. And, they would maybe have some tremor, sudden outburst, would be withdrawn. We advanced from that to changing the word actually to World War II. We had battle fatigue. And many of us can remember in the movie General Patton slapping the young man. When the general asked him, he said, "What's wrong with you, son?" He said, "General, I can't stand anymore. I can't stand the shelling, can't stand it." And he slapped him, and he said, "We will have no battle fatigue in my command." We still didn't know how to deal with it. There was nobody. When we came, Vietnam came. We had a lot of guys came back. We were about halfway through that, what I thought was an unnecessary war, before we came up with PTSD. A lot of guys came back, didn't know what to do. Many came back and got on with life. Same thing in World War II. I look at that generation of men and women. They came back. They didn't ask for anything. They just got on and built America. A lot of the guys coming back from mom, you see a lot of things. Some things, 18-year-olds who just figured out that Becky Ann was not a boy, suddenly grow up in combat. They had to. They had no choice. So inexperience, growing rather rapidly, and constant combat. When he came back, how did we talk about the issues? We didn't. About halfway through, we found out that, hey, we can put a name to this. Post-traumatic stress disorder. It was originally classified as an anxiety disorder, but we since have changed it to now it's a trauma and stress disorder.
Well, Doc, if I can, I was doing a little research on this, and I thought it was really guys from World War II on, because that's really when it was really talked about. But it was back from the Civil War And this has actually kind of been talked about for a very long time. Homer's Iliad suggested that the Greek warriors were having profound psychological effects to the wars back then. So that was one of the earliest written words of PTSD and etc. But I mean, this has been going on. This is a long time.
Oh yeah,
but it's only recently that they've, like you said, stamped a name on it.
Yeah.
And
we began to attack the problem. But
Sure.
Anytime you go back to, let's say, the Civil War, we all kind of took the British model and we marched in straight lines, as taking some of the forts and everything. Guys were dying, when they filed, who's going to pick up the flag and carry the flag. And those men came back, and I cannot imagine what they experienced. I can't imagine what they had to deal with. There was nobody they could talk to.
Right. That was a lot of alcoholism and drug use,
very much.
because
Probably more,
you
a lot
could
of
get
morphine
opium and opium and
addictions.
things like that just on the shelf.
Yeah, you can go buy a lot of them.
Yeah.
And carry it around the bottle. Just drink it.
And just drink it like
drink it out. You got a headache, drink some laudanum, which was.
It was nostalgia, and soldier's heart was around the Civil War is what they called it.
Yeah. And but it's a disease that's been with us ever since we've been in combat. We have more people that have studied the matter. We're more sophisticated at treating it. We don't tell people, we just need to get over that. I can imagine, I hate to say this is 24. Back in the mid-'70s, I was talking to a lady in Memphis, and she said, well, the man I date, he has this thing. He says, the war still behind. She said, it's been 10 years. He needs to get over that. At that time, we were on the early end of learning about PTSD and trying to combat, the issues that came up with it. And I think one of the worst things we can do is somebody that has it, we say, well, it'll get better, or you just need to get over that, because that's not going to happen. You got to have, if you have it, and listen, a lot of guys come back from that, and to get PTSD, you either got to experience a traumatic event or you got to personally witness a traumatic event. The symptoms don't usually show up until about 30 days later, 60 days later, in which then you can begin to deal with it. But a lot of guys came back, kind of processed their own self through it, didn't get it, and got on with life. I played golf and with a young man the other day, Afghanistan veteran. They did 3 tours. Got injured as they tried to hot rope it out of a helicopter. The helicopter hit a thermal, bounced it up. He lunged, missed the rope, fell 40 feet. But I talked to him about this. He said, I was able to process it. Some people cannot. Some people, they come back, they get into alcohol abuse, they get into drug abuse. They don't seek help. They don't talk about it. One of the values of talking about your experiences is that if you get them out in front of you, you're able to put them in the right boxes. But if you don't tell me what's wrong with you or what you experience, I'm guessing in the dark. Now I have a little bit of advantage having been in combat, having been out there myself. So when a veteran says something to me about it, I can relate to. One asked me the other day. He said, "Do you remember the first time a round went over your head?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I said my button on my blouse was like a cross tie between me and Mother Earth. So, yeah.
Well, T-Rex, the guy that was on last week's show talking about this, he said it's really hard for veterans to come out and talk to these book doctors that have no experience in it. And he said he went through 4 or 5 people before he found someone that he could actually relate to. And he says that's common from veterans, not finding somebody that they can actually communicate with.
It's hard if you've never been there. It's not John Wayne. It's the movies have a tendency to glorify combat. It's scary as hell. And every day, the team I had, we would sit in a circle, hold hands, and decide today's the day we're going to die. And you had to get over that bridge, and then you can go do what you had to do. But you look at 18-year-olds, I mean, hell, I was all of 25 leading people into combat. So
they say the male brain hasn't really, fully constructed itself until you're 25 or 26 years old. So it's not fully developed.
Even as high as 28.
Yeah. So
you said symptoms earlier, Doc. What are some of the symptoms of PTSD?
Well, I think some of them is lack of sleep. Can't sleep. Cannot control your anger. At times, sudden outbursts, you feel lonely, you get sad. You can withdraw and kind of isolate yourself. You could turn to drugs, alcohol. There's probably 20, 30 symptoms that you have that you could go through and see. But a good therapist figures out, what the real issues are. And like I said, I think the VA does good work. They just swamped with people. And to get drugs, prescriptions, they might get 10 minutes with a psychiatrist.
Early on, that was one of the things that brought on the opioid crisis in America. Was the guys coming back from combat were just given opioids and said, "Here, just deal with it," and that helped create part of the opioid crisis in America.
Yeah, there were some of the units. The medic would come by if you're going out on night patrol. Ask if you'd want Dexedrine, and I can remember a good friend of mine. He was with in the 101st Airborne, but he said, he said, if fear doesn't keep my guys awake and alert, I sure as hell don't want to get them hyped up. Where they're chatty Cathy, and put everybody else at risk. But yeah, we did. We gave them these drugs, do this, do that. Anything to overcome, anything to complete the mission. We never thought about what's the final outcome. And we didn't get to that until, I'd say, over halfway through that silly war. And we finally began to deal with it. We still got a long way to go.
Oh, absolutely.
Still have a long way to go.
Well, I would think just in general, emotional, just the whole dealing with the brain, we're still trying to figure that out. I don't think we really know how the brain
fully
is
works.
Affected.
No.
I mean, we really don't. I do believe we're still in that early stages of trying to really figure out how the brain interacts with its environment, how it's affected by various stimuli and stuff like that. Speaking of that, I've got some statistics here that I thought were
really?
Yeah,
you
Jason with statistics here. But it's PTSD in veterans, and Doc, you may be able to kind of shed a little bit light on this. Is they say about an estimate 7% of veterans will develop PTSD at some point. Is that
that's about right?
From what your research has shown, and then they said that compares about 6% to the general population. Because right now they say 6% of the U.S. population, just in general, will experience PTSD. Is that
Well, I've had the number run either 3.5. It depends on whose research you're looking at, but it can run from 3.5 to 6%. 6% is a high number.
I looked at some statistics too. They say that an estimated 70% of adults in the United States have experienced at least one traumatic event in their lifetime.
Right.
And up to 20% of these people will go on to develop PTSD.
Yeah, it's not just related to combat
Right.
veterans.
It could be any trauma.
It can be any
Sexual abuse, physical abuse, long term. We're getting into a little bit of complex PTSD. But
they say 5% of Americans, which is more than 13 million people, have PTSD at any given time.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
That's a lot of people.
But you go back and look at what kind of experiences you can have. It's...
Yeah, I see like 1 in 3 people who experience severe trauma will develop PTSD. I've got some stats who kind of break it down by race.
Yeah, I got. We must have found the same thing.
We must have found the same thing.
I found one, if I could throw this out there, Doc, and I want to get your kind of opinion on this one too. I found one that said 16% of emergency physicians meet the diagnostic criteria of PTSD.
Yeah,
and that's a huge number.
It's a big number. I don't know how accurate it is, but these men and women who get into ER, some of the traumatic things that they have to deal with, some of the things they have to see. And if you've been in an ER room on a Saturday night in a big city, Lord knows what goes on.
It's a combat zone.
It is.
My dad and my brother were, my dad was, and my brother still is a paramedic. They've been in that field for a long, long time. You want to talk about, law enforcement as well as, paramedics and stuff like that. My brother hasn't really told me everything, but he shared some stories, and he was like, it's not the same after seeing what I saw. And I was like, I believe it. And he's gone to some counseling and seen some people about that kind of stuff. So I can definitely see where either a hospital or, a paramedic out in the field and things like that, changes a person.
I would think anybody that is subjected to trauma on a regular basis, and that's why it's so prevalent in those kind of professions, police, fire, medical, any, of course, soldiers in combat, or, anytime the brain has to deal with this stuff coming in, it has to do something to kind of manage that, so to speak. And I think that's why those professions end up suffering with a lot of PTSD versus your typical accountant,
right?
Or an engineer, or someone that's not dealing with bad stuff all the time.
Well, we keep talking about wars and soldiers in wars. Well, what about the civilians that are in those battle areas also?
Oh yeah, they go through it.
They're going through it.
That's what I'm saying.
There's a lot of people that this can affect.
Anybody that's dealing with severe trauma like that, I mean, I can't even imagine.
Well, you look what's going on in Israel today, in Gaza. Constant shelling on both sides, death all around you. Little kids who cannot process other than fear.
Yeah.
Many of those are going to be manifest into some form of PTSD. I've never been in a place where I was driven from my home because of war.
Yeah.
I've seen little people get killed or something like that. So it's the civilians, paramedics, doctors, and everybody else who have to live in this stuff. A good number of them are going to have it. And in a lot of cases, they don't have anybody to turn to talk about it. So we need to be a lot more aware, especially when somebody says, I remember this time. Don't turn them off. Don't downplay it. Don't say, oh, well, it'll get better. I had an older sister. She lost her husband. Car was coming from the driver's side on a crossing road, didn't stop. Hit his truck. He went through the windshield, and he was a farmer. And if you know anything about farmers, most of them don't like seatbelts because they like to be able to get in and out of that truck. She had her seatbelt on. She had just bruises. And after that event, she was always nervous coming up on a crossroad or driving on rural roads, and Louisiana's got a lot of rural roads, so she preferred driving on interstates, places where they got wide roads. 61, good example, but I could sense the tenseness in her when she was riding with me. So takes one event where death occurs, traumatic event, she witnesses, she experienced it.
Yeah.
And
that was one of the symptoms that I found was avoidance of reminders of traumatic events. That's one of the big, that's like the top three
it is.
symptom is just staying away from that situation altogether.
Yeah, you have to look at the symptoms, which avoidance, and that is staying away from people, sometimes who can have a negative impact on you, and don't put yourself in situations where you can re-experience that. Now, veterans, if a lot of them with their career, they get pulled back in. I have a son-in-law, a West Point guy, 101st Airborne guy, colonel, and I think he did in Iraq 4 tours, and I think he did 5 in Afghanistan. He was a helicopter pilot. And I can tell you from Vietnam days, helicopter pilots were godsends. Those men had no fear. And a helicopter's a big object coming in real slow that you can shoot out of the sky. Yet they did it time after time. Some of them would go back and pick up the wounded, even though they finished the run dropping off the combatants in the landing zone. They turn around and go back to help because we didn't have paramedic helicopters. And then you get deployed. Some get over the experiences. I know a guy here in the area, he never has. He was a Vietnam Marine helicopter pilot. Just never could get over it. He had a lot of counseling, but he still, his wife has to watch him.
Wow.
So
this may be, I mean, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to. It's probably too personal. But how was it for you coming back from Vietnam? As far as did you experience PTSD yourself, or was it kind of
Well, I probably experienced some of it because when you come back, when you initially come back, you're going to have dreams.
Of course.
You're going to have nightmares about reliving some of those experiences because some of them they can be pretty scary.
Yeah.
You realize it at the time, but you try to make light of it. But as time went on, I was able to deal with it. And not get hung up in a lot of the things a lot of guys did. We were not welcome back to the U.S. as combatants like other. Desert Storm changed all that for veterans coming home.
Yeah.
Much like World War II guys came home. There was nobody at the airport for us. Yeah. There's no parades, no nothing. So, but yeah, you're going to have some of those memories.
Well, you were talking about, how you dealt with that. What role do family dynamics play in both the development and recovery from PTSD?
Well, if you got an understanding family, when they talk about it, and they can be sensitive to what you're saying and not take it lightly, oh, you'll get better. And well, don't shut me down because of that. That's not what I want to hear. Listen to what they have to say, and try to understand. If you've never been there, it's hard to understand. Because, like I said, most people relate war to John Wayne and Sands of Iwo Jima.
Rub some dirt on it.
Rub some dirt on it.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Rub some dirt on it and keep going.
As my baseball coach. Yeah, I'll rub some dirt on it. I said, Coach, he broke his leg. Put 2 hands of dirt on it. Yeah. So, it's if you have a family that just kind of tries to shut it out, as some do, that's tough.
I can imagine it makes it so much worse because then, I mean, you talk about someone that has a hard time probably opening up and talking about it, and then whenever they get shut down, makes it even, it's hard. It just reinforces, I guess, a lot of.
It does.
Yeah.
You know, so it's, I've heard guys say, you know, if you talk about it, you really weren't there. You know, that's not true.
Yeah.
We encourage guys and women to talk about what did you experience? What did you see?
Yeah.
What did you, and some of the guys in Afghanistan, members of the 173rd Airborne Brigade, who kind of stocked a place up in the Cordon-Gall Valley, where most of our combat wounds were coming out of. We came to a point, they were living in holes in the wall had been chipped out there for centuries almost, hundreds of years. No hot water, virtually no hot meals, so to speak. Couldn't take a bath. Probably didn't change underwear, didn't change uniforms.
Right.
They could do 60, 90-day tours, and you had to get them out of there. But still, they needed help. A lot of them needed help,
I think that's one of the things that this is a generational show, that there's a greater awareness and openness regarding mental health in these younger generations now, which encourage seeking help and discussing psychological difficulties more openly.
Yeah.
And these younger generations are more likely to advocate for mental health days and recognize the importance of mental wellness, whereas our group, there was no joke. Rub some dirt on it and go
on down the road.
As funny as that is, that literally was the mentality
Yeah.
back then. And these younger generations are more aware of these things and the fact that they really need to be dealt with. And we need to respond. Like you said, if somebody starts talking, listen to them.
Yes.
Sit down. Spend some time with them. What's the worst that's going to happen? You might learn something, but you're also creating a safe arena for someone to open up and talk about something that they're genuinely dealing with.
Well, a lot of people get embarrassed when they start hearing about it, and they don't want to hear about it, so they'll try to shut it off. I had the privilege of doing volunteer work at Brooks Army Medical Center, where the men and women coming back from Afghanistan, and if you'd go through the wards, so to speak, see combatants lost arms, legs, part of their face blown off. And I'm thinking, my goodness. And then you talk to some of them, and they say, Doc, I just want to get back with my family. They're not talking about mom and dad. They're talking about the people that left in Afghanistan. So some of them had great attitudes. Still had to work a lot with some of them. I get a Band-Aid cut. I ain't too happy. So losing an arm, a leg, something like that.
Well, I'm interested in how you said that. I have a friend of mine. He's no longer with us, who was a Vietnam veteran, and he was a pilot, but he felt guilty about coming home.
Yeah, you have survivor's guilt.
There's a lot of survivor's guilt. Does that play into that at all? If you lost a couple friends in a traumatic way, is that survivor's guilt kind of PTSD?
Yes,
also?
if you're with them in combat, and you lose a buddy or two in that fight, it's going to impact you.
Yeah, I bet.
You can't see the zipping up of that bag and say, that happens in combat.
I can imagine. I can only imagine what it's like to lose a good friend of mine, like right now, just, being in civilian life. I can't imagine, being through forging some sort of brotherhood of people through the kind of stuff that you do in war, and then of course losing that person. That's not just a relationship. That's not just a friendship. I feel like that's
probably a lifeline in many ways.
And at
That
that point,
is.
like to have that, like I can only imagine.
Well, you depend on the guys on the right and left
Yeah.
to watch your back as you watch their back. And you share a strong bond with those people because you hope to get all of them back.
Right.
You hope to go out with 9 people. You hope to come back with 9 people.
Of course.
In Vietnam, life expectancy of a Marine platoon commander was 27 days.
Wow.
And in a hot landing zone, 14 minutes.
Gee.
Well, that's what a lieutenant coming on to the field was 7 minutes. A new lieutenant getting off of brand new, he had 7 minutes to live.
Yep. Because you only get experience, but unfortunately,
By experience.
You can read the books, you study the manuals, you can do this. But like I said, you hear that first round go over your head and say, this is not a drill.
But also, what does every lieutenant have? A sergeant.
Yeah.
What does every captain have? A bigger sergeant.
Yeah.
What does every colonel have? A bigger sergeant. What does every general have? A bigger. And that was really to instruct and help and teach them.
Well, we
and
found
get them
out
ready for
we
it.
changed, and in Vietnam, we changed the method of who's going to lead the patrol.
Mm-hmm.
It was the one that had the most experience.
Right.
It could be a corporal, in which case the lieutenant was just another rifleman. But he had the experience. He'd been out there. He'd walked the trails. And he knew the terrain pretty well. So we looked at how do we better equip ourselves to go out into combat. Let the oldest guy around there in your unit lead the team out there. As you gain more experience, you eventually become a team leader. So you're right. Everybody's got a sergeant. And if you got a good one, sergeant majors, which are, when they're angry, it's nothing like God on earth.
Right. Yep.
So,
Yep.
and they let the rest of the officers exist as long as we're quiet and don't make a mess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but they're invaluable. These combat guys and these old Navy chiefs, they get you through it.
But that's part of the trust.
Yes,
and
it
the
is.
family and all of that working together to create this atmosphere. And then so when you come home, you've lost that lifeline. You've lost that trust. And now you're in another new situation trying to develop all these new things in life. And what you could count on back then is gone.
Yeah, you have to rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to find people that you trust, And sad thing, you cannot trust everybody,
Right.
And that was a war. The Vietnam War was when people were going to Canada to get out of the draft. When you had guys that doing whatever they could. If you were married and had a pregnant wife, you probably could get out of going,
Well, it was the war before that 15-year-olds were lying to get
To
into
get in.
the Army to go fight.
You take Audie Murphy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was
Thank you.
He
And
was 16.
one of the most decorated.
Most decorated guy in World War II.
Why do you think that shift? I mean, what was the difference? Why you have in World War II, you've got kids running to combat, and by the time you get to Vietnam, you have people running away to Canada.
I think one of the things we lost in that period of time, we lost patriotism.
Mm-hmm.
There was no question after the attack at Pearl Harbor. Go down to a recruiting anywhere in America.
Lines were long.
Lines were long. Hollywood movie stars, Clark Gable, Jimmy Stewart, people like that, Glenn Ford, all went down and stood in line. I doubt if you would have that today.
I wonder if we had to storm the beaches of Normandy again, whether we would even have people to be able to do that.
Well, no, because there's no safe spaces.
I had friends of mine, or I think had not direct friends of mine, but I've heard from people and relatives of friends, and like people that are pretty immediate to me that they were of age whenever 9/11 happened, and it was the same thing.
Yeah, there were a lot of guys
a lot of
that
people.
a lot of men and women said, "I'm
Right.
going."
Yeah,
My little brother was one of them.
Yeah, I'm going to go.
right.
And God love them because they saddled up and they went. But we lost along the way. We lost patriotism for this country, and I think.
Well, they've changed the terminology. That's what they're doing right now. Instead of patriotism, it's called nationalism.
Yeah.
And Christian nationalism, and they're trying to destroy the foundation of what this country is about.
Well, there are people out there. We say if America lays down its arms and sets the example, other countries will do the same thing.
No,
They have not read history.
No.
No, they haven't.
Ever since there were 4 people on the earth, the other 2 wanted what the other 2 had.
Yeah.
And it's been that way ever since. And laying down your weapons and say, "Hey, we're going to get along with everybody." You're going to be speaking a different language in a generation or 2 because they're coming. And
Yeah, and I mean, imagine in other parts of the world where these young people their people are a little bit more hardened up, so to speak. I mean, can you kind of speak on that a little bit? And
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
As far as these other populations in these other countries that have been through a lot harder times than we have, and their population is a little bit hardened up more than what we experience here in America, which, thank goodness, we're not having to deal with artillery shells exploding in our front yards. But, I mean, I often wonder if America has to be called up to go off and do this. Do we have the means to do that anymore?
Well, I don't have a solid answer for that. It scares me to think that we would not have that. I know that Marine Corps Commandant back, I think, when he did an assessment of our battle with China, let's say, he said, I'm glad, the report is the same as it was last year. We lost. We don't want to, I think, this has been a while, but one of the people at the Pentagon, very high, I think on the Joint Chiefs staff, said we had to go to war with China. We had about 17 days of ammunition. We're not, we've lost support of the military.
Well, I think it's preparation even past that. What are the Chinese kids learning? When they're 5 to 7 years old, they're breaking down an AK-47.
Oh, yeah.
What are we teaching our kids? If you go to Russia, by the time you're 15, you know how to break down an AK-47. You know how to clean it. You know how to shoot it. You know 2 languages. You know many more things than we're teaching our kids here in America. And part of that was, I forgot which, and this is part of my brain damage, and I apologize. There was one of the rulers from another country said that America is sexualizing their children, and they're destroying America from the inside, because if you look at these other countries, their kids are ready for things that America is not.
Well, you go back to the days of Khrushchev, and he said, "We'll conquer you one day without having to fire."
He said, "I'll never fire one bullet."
One bullet.
That's right. I've said that 4 or 5 times here.
I will take you internally.
Mm-hmm.
And we keep doing things that take away from the cohesiveness that you will need.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't, like I said, we're not as patriotic as we used to be. When I can remember when Desert Storm guys came along. I was living in Nashville, and Fort Campbell was about 45 miles north of us. The overpasses on the interstate were draped with colors. Beautiful. The people standing on the burns, cheering them on, coming in. 9/11 did it again, and it's, but somewhere along the way, we took a left, and we cannot make everybody the same. We'd like to.
Mm-hmm.
We'd like the perfect world is everybody's equal. Everybody has the same. We don't have a perfect world. We never had a perfect world. So we're struggling, and we would struggle if we had to go to combat now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about something. You being in the field that you're in, or were in the field that you were in, do you ever have moments where you find it difficult, like when you're talking to people, not to kind of like, I don't want to say diagnose them or anything like that, but like, is there ever like a moment like where you have to kind of flip a switch between like your doctor side and your personal side kind of thing?
I think people come in, when they first find out you're one of those people, they say, "Uh-oh,
Yeah.
Is he going to diagnose me?"
Well, they wonder what question you're asking.
Yeah,
why are you asking me that?
Question,
Yeah.
You look at it and say, "Was he looking at moving my foot, moving my finger?"
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Well, it's funny, and I like how Ian said that because I have sadly some experience with that right now. With my accident, I went into neuropsych.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine from the outside said, be careful. Everything they do, everything they say, everything they ask you to do, everything they ask you to answer the question, there's a reason behind it.
Well,
They're putting you in a trick bag for absolutely everything to see your reaction.
Well, you're trying not so much you're trying to get to the base of it.
Mm-hmm.
You're really trying to gather data. And, we don't play games. At least I don't,
That's psyops.
Yeah, I am probably, as one of my professors said, you be the therapist to avoid. Yeah. I don't give crutches to people. But Ian, to your point, a lot of people think we do.
Right.
I don't. Somebody said, "What do you think? What's he like? What's she like?" I had one guy ask me, he said, "You're going to meet my mother-in-law today. Won't you spend time with her?" I said, "No, I'm not going to do that."
Right.
Yeah, but I really want to know. I said, "Well, figure out by yourself."
Right.
She's your mother-in-law, not mine.
My the reason why I kind of asked that is because like I said, my brother is currently a paramedic, and a lot of, as you can imagine, as a paramedic, everyone makes the joke that like, oh, whenever I need an emergency, I'm going to call you. And he's like, no, you always call 911 because I'm not going to be the one to come in and help you.
That's right.
And even if I wanted to, I'm not the one that's going to show up, and that's not the correct protocol. And obviously, it's a joke and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But again, the amount of times also that we're hanging out and someone's like, I don't feel well. What is that or whatever?
Yeah.
Whatever. And
you
he's
can
like,
imagine.
I don't know.
You can imagine people.
Yeah.
I know a person, and I think I wouldn't want her as a patient.
Yeah. Yeah.
She'd just wear me out.
Right.
And
you can be honest with yourself with that. You'd be like,
yeah. But there are people that think we do that.
Right.
That's a parlor game.
Right.
And when they ask me, well, what do you think I am? Then I give them some wild, ridiculous description, and say, well, you're halfway nuts, but I still like you.
What was that show, The Mentalist?
Yes.
Where the guy was
yes,
that was
that's right.
Yeah. I have a question for you. What is one thing you wish everyone would understand about the impact of trauma on the human mind? As a behavioral psychologist, what is one thing, you could drive into us today and help us understand this?
Listen to the person. It's, I guess the thing is that I've found, at least, that PTSD and stuff like that, people don't want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like them to be open to understand what it fully is. It's an illness. It's a mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, we can deal with it. And through what we call talk therapy, which is a nicer way of saying psychotherapy, or through medications. We got some drugs out there that work pretty good. and in most cases we really wish we didn't have to use them. We'd rather talk them out of it. But I would like for people just to look at it and say, it exists. It is an illness. It exists. A lot of people have got it. And don't focus on the veteran. We got people from 2016 flood.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, look at that. That's close. We all experienced it. Some, you know, I had a cousin over in Watson, got up to go to the bathroom at 3 a.m. in the morning. The water was up to his knees. He eventually wound up with 7 feet in his house.
Yep.
And when you lose everything, I look at what's going on in middle Texas,
That's
places
right.
with
A
the
lot
tornado,
of flooding. And
a lot of the tornadoes. You wake up, you had a house, then you're looking at rubble, and you say, and the reporter, you know, they're supposed to do their job. Well, how do you feel about that? My God, how do you think I feel?
Yeah.
I just lost everything, you know.
everything I've ever owned.
Everything, you know, everything I own. And the vast majority of them tough up and say, well, we'll just start again.
Mm-hmm.
But try to understand what's there. Listen to the person. I'm not asking you to be a diagnostician, but I am asking you to give them an ear.
But hearing what you're saying about, you know, noticing signs in people for PTSD, like hearing what you're saying before and then now talking about that now, I have friends that were, you know, in their teenage years or early 20s whenever that flood specifically happened. And you want to talk about drawing back whenever like a large storm comes in, or, you know, getting nervous and scared.
Absolutely.
I have friends personally that still kind of like when it starts to rain.
People that are right now when it rains.
I know. Oh, and
it rains, like, is the river going to go up?
Right.
Well, that's back to one of the symptoms
you know,
of PTS is not reliving
exactly.
a situation close to the one.
And
That's what you're doing.
That's what I was talking about.
It's a flashback.
Of course, right.
And,
like I said, I have friends of mine that are very close to me that and I don't think they have PTSD specifically, but we were talking about correlations of things. Like whenever a bad storm happens, they get a little tense. And
sure, they
get
do.
Scared.
Oh yeah, I can imagine people in New Orleans with Katrina.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anytime a hurricane is coming, you can sense it in their voice, and it's a terrible deal. Also, I found it interesting also that, at least according to what these things I read, they say women are more likely to suffer from PTSD, and beyond that, the higher incidence of PTSD within non-white, like Latinos, African Americans, and
Native Americans, Latinos, U.S. Latinos.
What do you think is going on there with
well,
that?
we don't fully understand. We don't fully understand why women, and I'll have to answer the question very cautiously, because I don't want a lot of ladies outside my house with pitchforks and torches. But some guys say, well, is dead or weak or sick. That's a bunch of nonsense. They're not. Far from it, and we don't know fully what causes women to have it more than men. I wish we did, but I don't have a clear answer for that.
Mental illness over the generations has had this horrible stigma to it.
Oh, God, yes.
Okay, horrible stigma to it. And if I'm having a bad day, if something's going on in my head, I got 3 or 4 guy friends that I can call, and we can go take a ride. We can go do something. We don't even have to talk about what's going on in my head, and I can feel better about it.
Yes.
But women need to talk about it.
Yeah.
And finding someone to trust that's not going to be judgmental or argumentative or something to you about your feelings. We've had this stigma on mental illness for so long. In the 50s, 40s, here's a Valium.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Go to your room, take the Valium.
Right.
And guys have ways to deal with it. I don't know if that number is correct, that more women, but guys just have different ways to deal with those kind of things. Go hunting, go fishing, hang out with your buddy. You don't even have to talk about that specific event, but your buddy going, you okay? Yes. Well, and it's how you deal with it.
Right. According to this Forbes article, it said black women have experienced the highest amount of PTSD in middle age.
Wow.
Man.
That's wild.
It is.
I don't know what it is about middle age that these things seem to happen more, but at least according to
maybe
this,
maybe when it manifests, probably, or something.
yeah, they say basically in women, they say 10 to 12% develop PTSD in their lifetime. In men, it's 5 to 6%. That's a big jump.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think a lot of them has to, some of it at least, I won't say a lot, but some of it has to do with the fact that the woman is the center of the house, the center of the family. My oldest son was born with a critical heart defect. We were living in North Carolina the first 11 months of life. He was in Duke University Medical Center 10 times, almost died twice. At 19 months, he weighed 19 pounds and he had open heart surgery. He's about 6 feet now, 50 years old, was a heck of a high school athlete and college athlete. But I know in the back of my, if we had another child, first thing, what's it like? And when I hear today, when children are born in our family, nieces and stuff like that, when I hear, well, they have a minor heart problem, my radar goes off, because you start thinking about those days of sitting there beside a child's bed,
Yep.
and watching him, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
So I think they're the center of the family. They carry an awful lot of burden. I grow tired of hearing things that say women can't do things, which is a bunch of nonsense. It's and the CIA was ripe with it for many, many years, and they still probably have it, where you can have brilliant women, but they'd be given a clerical job.
Yeah.
Now we found out who figured out where Osama bin Laden was. Females. Who figured out the attack, the first bomb of the Trade Center was a truck bomb. If you can remember, Bill Clinton was in the White House. A couple of women had already projected this is going to happen. That's when nobody paid attention. Well, they're women. What do they know? Well, they're reading.
Well, that was some of the math with the moon landings, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Those were women scientists working faster than the computers to generate the landing sequences.
Yeah. There were 2 women who actually, in the original 7, because they did open it to women to be astronauts, but it was a window dressing. There were actually 2 who scored better, did better, flying and everything else. They didn't get picked. Well, they're women. Now, I think the moon trip, I think it's all female crew. Listen, I've met women that I'd go into combat with any day, and that's the biggest compliment you can pay one combatant to another.
I was in private sector protective services for years, and one of my best partners was female. She was one of the most amazing females. Luckily, in my life, I can speak from experience, and I'm sure Jason will chime. I married one of the most capable women on the planet. My wife is just so intelligent, so capable. I've been blessed with that. Yeah,
so is mine. Little 5'2" coon ass. Somebody said, "Are you afraid?" I said, "I'm not afraid of many things except that."
Right?
But I think that's it, and I think a lot of it they try to hold it in because they are the center of the family. They don't want to get anybody upset and nervous. But I think if you can find good people that you can talk to, that's a buddy. That's not going to beat you up. You should do that about any problem. You got a good priest, rabbi, imam, whatever, that you can trust. Talk to them. You got an issue? Talk to them. I'm a big fan of getting it out so I can look at it, getting it out where I can put it in the boxes, getting it out where you can help the people look at it and say, look at this and watch this. Because when you're in the middle of it, you're not thinking about that.
Yeah.
You're just thinking about getting out of it,
Right.
and getting back.
Well, those skills that you're talking about right there are kind of the same skills that are in the foxhole.
Yes.
If you and so you're developing that team again. If my team, we had 7 people in my team, in your team, and everybody, not everybody is the same.
No.
Some of these people can do something a little bit better. Some of these people may not. So you put people in certain places, and when you start talking, but not only does the person doing the talking feel better about it, but if you're listening, you're part of that team now. They can trust you and you can trust them, because now you have some understanding of what their capabilities are, or their liabilities are, and you can build from that.
Yeah, you want to know if you're going out, you're in a war, you're in battle, you sure as hell want to know.
Well, you don't want the nearsighted guy doing the long range shooting.
No.
So you're going to change somebody that, who can see the traps up front, who needs to see further away.
Yep.
And you build that team based on those strengths and weaknesses. And it's the same thing in life.
It is. I guess I get back to we've got to try to develop trust. I always worry about somebody who says, you can tell me, I can keep a secret.
You were saying something about opening up to people, whether it be friends, family, clergy, whoever you want to talk to kind of open up. What is a good frame of reference for yourself for someone that needs to go get professional help, like that next level of you need more than just opening up and talking about it. You need to go.
Well, in my case, I can determine that, when I listen to it,
right.
If I hear it, I'm not their therapist. I can suggest,
okay,
that, and I can recommend.
Okay.
And like
my
brother said earlier, we put a stigma on mental illness.
Yes.
Right.
A bad stigma. You didn't talk about it. Oh, no, you don't talk about crazy. You got a crazy aunt. Well, hell, every family's got
Everybody's
got a crazy aunt.
Sure.
But let's don't talk about that.
But it's all situational too,
Yes.
right? Yeah, it would,
right.
Just be aware, talk to people, listen.
Be aware, and the people that you talk with about close personal issues, you got to trust them, and you got to convey that trust.
Right.
Not long ago, a person said, I want to tell you about something. I said, okay. But he told me not to tell you. I said, then don't tell me. Oh, yeah, but I want you to know. I said, no, I don't want to know. I don't want you to break your word.
Yeah.
But some people can't wait. They like to be the bearer of the good news, And a couple of days later, the guy told me, I thanked him, for his comments. But I don't have a lot of trust in people to say, yeah, he told me not to tell you, but I'm going to tell you anyway. But don't tell him I told you. I'm not going to be part of this conspiracy. Don't tell me. I'm not listening. I'll get up and leave.
Right.
Before I listen to that.
We've talked about listening. And in my experience, it's hard for people to listen. Most people listen to respond instead of listening to learn. As a behavioral psychologist, can you maybe expand on some great skills in the listening arena to help people in that situation? Maybe tomorrow somebody listening is going to find themselves in this situation. What are some things you can help us do to understand the skill of listening?
I think one of the things that I look at, we hear people. We don't listen to the people. And what you have to do when you want to listen to them, you got to look at them. You got to have good eye contact, and you got to be sincere. Don't worry about your response. When you're in an argument with your spouse, the only thing we're thinking about, what can I say?
Right.
Rather than truly listening to what he or she has to say and not defend it, but to let it come out and say, okay, that's good to that. That's a good point. But focus on the person, be relaxed, and don't say, oh, yeah, I know how you feel. Well, you cut it off right then. So let them tell the story and stay away from words like, I don't like questions that begin with why, because it's an accusatory word.
Okay.
If you ask me if Ian said, well, why'd you do that? Now I got to defend it.
Okay.
But if Ian says, help me understand your reasoning for that, now I got a whole stadium I could play in.
Right.
Rather than just the end zone.
Okay.
So I get them to try to stay away from that word, why. Why do you do it? You're going to have it with your husband and wife. That's a big word. Well, why do you say that? Be willing to bite your tongue sometime and not make a comment. Let them have the moment. Americans cannot stand silence.
Mm-hmm.
We learned in Southeast Asia that the Southeast Asian person in combat can lie in ambush for 6 weeks and never move. We could say, and pretty soon you have to say, hey, Lieutenant, 10 minutes just click by,
Right.
So we cannot stand silence. So we want to fill it in. And we also want to share our experience with what that person is going through. Kind of back off of that a little bit. Let them talk. Let them tell their story. And then go back and try to ask, how did you arrive at that conclusion? Or what led to that decision? Rather than say, why did you do that?
Such a simple word.
Yes, it is.
I'm glad we went on this route there, because such a simple word just changes the whole
thing.
The
Dynamics
whole thing.
of the conversation.
Yes, the whole conversation.
Yeah, it does.
And you wouldn't think why, who, what, where, when, and why.
Yeah.
That when you're writing something, who, what, when, where, and why. And you just need to take that word and just throw it away.
Yeah, when you're having a conversation with somebody, even when you're arguing with someone, your spouse, stay away from that word why. Because it is an accusatory word. And because I have to defend at that point. But so focus on the person, kind of bite your tongue. Don't share your experience unless they ask you, did you ever experience anything like that? If you have, tell them the story. If you haven't, say, no, I have not. Don't cut them off. Don't look at your watch.
How about these phones, too? Put that down.
Well, I used to tell my students at the universities that when you go for an interview, take your watch off. Put it in your pocket, put it in your purse. Because I've noticed that Americans, when they get a little bit nervous, they look at their watch. And so don't do that. Get relaxed. Don't look at your watch. If they say something that's embarrassing, don't show the sign. Don't say, "Oh my God," I didn't know you did that. Unless, of course, it said, I was Jack the Ripper student. But listening and having a dialogue with someone, we can have conversations. The Native Americans were masters of conducting dialogues. They would sit around the circle of the fire. Everybody's opinion mattered. Nobody could criticize that opinion. The chief would work his way through, and he eventually got the information he needed. But the art of truly listening requires effort.
I've been in a couple of creative teams that were like that, and also in some that were not like that, and it's very evident which ones were better to work with, and I think had better outcomes.
Yeah.
Whenever you had a team full of people that you would have the leader at the table that would be able to, their job, the entire table was not supposed to say that was a bad idea or tell an idea no, but we're going to write them all down and figure out which one we want to go with as far as, pick the one that we all like and the direction we want to go in. Whereas I've been in some teams before where it was like, that's a bad idea. And I was like, well, now I feel a little bit like I don't want to share anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't want to contribute. And then, being part of a team where half the team is like, I feel like I can't talk or can't share my opinion on things is
I like the way you went there with the Native Americans, because there was no real written word.
No, you take
and so it was a storyteller, but to learn the stories, you had to listen.
Yes.
And a lot of people had the understanding about the Native Americans of what a medicine bag was. And do you know what the medicine bag was?
I think we've talked about this before, but I'm not
it was
sure.
It was a story. As you're going through your life and bad things or traumatic things happen to you or something,
Right.
and you find a rock or this or something that reminds you of that event, you put it in your medicine bag.
Yes.
And you can go through your own medicine bag and help yourself deal with those issues. But then one day, if Jason is having a bad day or going through something traumatic in his life, I take my medicine bag out and I tell him the story of which he's going to listen to, because he knows what's fixing to happen. I'm fixing to give you my medicine bag, and I'm going to tell you all these little events that went through my life, and I made it through that. And then I'm going to say, if I can do it, you can do it. And then you're going to take that medicine bag and start carrying it with you. And when you when you get through this event, you're going to put something that reminds you. And then you keep telling that story, and people listen. And that was one of the great things about the Native Americans, was they could tell great stories, and you listened.
Well, it was an oral-based tradition.
Yes.
Yeah. Navajo Indians have no written language.
Right.
So it's a historical. And I tell 7 people the story. You tell 7 more. They tell 7 more. That's how the history is carried. So Jason's right. They have to listen.
Got to listen
to the story because you want to get it right. There's no book. Go over to the library and check this out. You'll read about it. Not there.
No Google to search it either.
No Google. So you, the art of truly listening, and, therapists, a lot of time we have to bite our tongues because we want to jump in. We may see the answer. Don't give them the answer. We have to discover it together so they have ownership in what they did and they can understand it. If somebody comes in, I can give them a sheet of paper and say, here's the answer to all your problems. Say, okay. We haven't accomplished anything except an exchange of a piece of paper. But true listening and true dialogue is very, very difficult. And like I said, the Native Americans, that's how they did it. They spread the word, and I wish we could do it that way again. We don't teach it.
Nope.
We don't teach listening, how to listen.
Yeah.
That may be a future episode we ought to consider.
Do they call that, was that active listening?
Active listening,
I believe that's the term they use.
Well, y'all all probably participated in a little game. We used to do it in the university. A lot of time was to whisper in the ear of first person.
Oh, yeah, game of telephone.
Telephone, all big circle.
All big circle, and have the last person tell them, what'd you hear? I could say it's in Nashville, it's 95 degrees, sun shining, and it's hot. Every time I get up to the top, I got a full weather forecast of southeast country. Because we add to it. Or we don't listen. They say, what did he say? How many times we're sitting there, we think, what did he say? Because my mind wanders off, and we're afraid to say, look, I'm sorry, but my mind wandered off, and so would you repeat what you said? No shame in that.
We become a very visual nation. Before it was telling stories. Now I want to see it. And if I can't see it, now we've got attention deficit disorder, which your eyes glass over when somebody's talking to you, and you would rather be anywhere but having to listen to this person talk because you're not seeing something visual in front of you.
When I was a little boy growing up, my grandfather on my mom's side was full-blooded Choctaw Indian. And when I'd go over to visit him, our aunts and uncles, at night, after supper, there was no radio, no TV. The adults gathered on the back porch, on the front porch, and talked about the old times. I loved sitting there on that porch with my back against the wall, listening to the stories. There's a great book written by James Wilson, who was a professor at USC, called The Moral Sense. And he wanted to know, where did morality come from outside Judeo-Christian. So he visited a lot of tribes in Africa. And they did it the way the Native Americans did. Sat around the fire. The elders talked about the problems. The young guys sat behind them, and they listened to what's going on. And one of the elders told him, he said, things have changed. Not long ago, the government came through and put a light bulb in everybody's tent or hut. Now everybody stays inside and looks at that light bulb. We don't gather as often as we did. I'm a lot older than you guys. I can remember playing outside till it was absolutely dark.
Mm-hmm.
That was my generation too.
Yeah, and you'd hear somebody whistle, time to go. Then TVs came, then air conditioning came. Back in those days, we knew everybody on the block, for many blocks. Today, you could ask people who lives in the fourth house down. I couldn't tell you.
A lot of people can't tell you who
lives
next door.
Yeah. Yep. So, active listening, sound dialogue, not a conversation. We can have conversation, but you want to, when you're truly listening to a person, is have that. And the other two words I get people try to stay away from when you talk is yes and no. If you say no, you cut off the communication. Mm-hmm. If you say yes, some people can think, well, that's it. Mm-hmm. Well, my idea is not going to get out, so stay away from knowing yes. And explore it. Everybody's opinion counts. I can't tell you how many times when I was in industry, sitting in meetings, somebody said, that's the dumbest idea I ever heard of. Well, that burned the day.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to say anything. So follow the Native American model, as the old chief did. Everybody's opinion counts. You cannot criticize that opinion. And I will arrive at the decision. In some cases of the Native Americans, the women did. And the elders knew it, but they came up with better decisions because they were removed from it. They could see things. They weren't in close to it, because you can get too close, you're blind. You can get into a situation where you're in the middle of the forest, and you take an axe, sharp axe, and you start cutting trees down. At the end of the day, you look around, you cut a circle. You're still in the middle of the forest. It's just less trees. You hadn't cut a trail out of there. So stop, listen, figure out what needs to be done, and then cut your trail out of there. So,
all right. Well, I guess on that, that's a good place.
Wow,
to
what a
land
great
it.
conversation. I mean, Dr. Posey, thank you so much. I mean, it's been very insightful. I hope our listeners really take this to heart, and if they know anybody that may be having those issues,
right,
to listen to them.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you very much for having me. This is my first experience with podcasts. I still believe in the rotary dial will come back.
Well,
so
maybe we'll find a way to incorporate it.
But thank you very much. This has been a good experience.
Hopefully it didn't scare you off too bad.
Nope.
Well, it's the expression, we can cripple a generation by stick shift, writing in cursive, and going to a rotary dial phone.
That's true.
We kill the generation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll have you all know that I could still survive in that world. So I mean, just barely, but
one of the few.
Yeah.
Well, for anybody out there who's looking to connect with us, we have a Facebook page /Retrospect Pod where you can connect with us there. One thing I want to push on this one specifically is if you would like to, we have a YouTube channel that now has all of them, and again, it's all part of YouTube Music and all the new stuff they've changed over with Google and everything like that. The big thing to take away from this is if you go into the search bar and type @Retrospect Pod on YouTube, you can find the YouTube channel, subscribe, start liking the videos, and also you can give little comments or big comments there as well. I want to go ahead and push that because I don't think I've done that enough here, because that is definitely a place that you can listen to it more, a little more accessibly if you would like to. But anyways, until next week, thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone. God bless.
Goodbye, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for hanging out with us today for this great conversation. You're the best. Peace.